this webinar on how to do webinars that when people come to them, they think, hey, that wasn't too bad. I'm your host for today, Jonathan Aragon, with the Center for Academic and Faculty Excellence, here to help you achieve excellence. And co-hosting with me here today is Jesse Knippel, one of the Cafe Fellows. And in this Zoom layout, Jesse is to this side of me. How's everyone doing today? Good, great, could be better. Hate being asked that question. Got some thumbs up.
Good, but tired.
Good, but tired. Yeah, I feel that, it's
I'm in
February.
Istanbul right now, so this is why we have our difference.
What's that?
I am in Istanbul right now.
Oh,
so we have
Istanbul.
time difference, yes.
Oh, wow. So, what's the time difference? Is it like late at night?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I'll try to make this as engaging and painless as possible for you.
Thank you.
Yep, did the introduction. Okay, so a few guidelines for today's session. Number one is participation. So as far as this webinar goes, and all webinars that I do really, participation is open. So this is for you, right? It's a community conversation as much as it is me giving you some takeaways that are hopefully useful. So jump in at any time, be a part of the conversation at any point. You're not going to throw me off. You don't have to wait till the end to talk or ask questions or anything like that. Feel free to say anything you want in chat. I'm watching it, Jesse's watching it, so we'll respond promptly in real time. And participate however works for you. So, as you are right now is just fine, right? Cameras on, cameras off, listening on audio while you're laying on your couch taking notes, or in your office doing other work, or however it works for you, right? There's no rules for participation other than just be comfortable. Subtitles are enabled. So if you look at the, I'm munching on an apple, Elsie says, okay, great. Yeah, so eat lunch if you haven't, because it is 12, so it's lunchtime. Subtitles are enabled, so if you want to see my spoken word written out in real time, all you got to do is press the CC button below. And then the nice thing is you can adjust the size of the subtitles however you want. A few guidelines on Zoom fatigue. If you're going to a lot of these Zoom meetings, as we all are realistically, if you want to not look at yourself, there's 3 dots by your profile picture. If you press it, you can hide self-view so that it's more simulant of a real world interaction. Because when we talk to people in person, we're not holding a mirror up there. You can create a distance from your camera as you would in an in-person conversation, or if you're going to be close, adjust your window size so that it's comfortable and reduces your eye strain. Okay, so if you had a minute to think about webinars or any online presentations really that you've attended that were not such a great experience, what in your humble opinion made that experience not so great? Feel free to share in chat or out loud. Lack of interaction. By the way, hi Cindy, thank you for being my LinkedIn friend. Yeah, okay, so lack of interaction, not much community engagement or sense of togetherness. Difficult to hear and understand. Yeah, so that's a really good point, one that I hadn't thought of. If you have a headset to use, that's good. Having quality audio is really important, because if people can't hear you, then, even if your information is good, it's hard to engage. The extremes, either too much interaction and you don't feel like you learned anything, or no interaction at all. Yeah, that's a good point. So creating a lesson plan for your presentation is good so you can pace out like information giving time versus participation time. Lack of examples in how to apply learning to real life. Yeah, so I think that aligns with the meaningfulness aspect of it. So there needs to be real value. It needs to be meaningful. Great. How about things that when you went to a webinar, you left it and you were like, that wasn't so bad? Or maybe even liked it. Feel free to share in chat or out loud. And if you're eating lunch, don't worry about it. Colorful visuals and slides. Okay, so visually engaging. Good use of visuals to provide data or examples. Okay, yeah, so there's like a whole guideline on how to provide visual data. When the presentation or workshop matched with the title. So I was interested in the content. Yeah, maybe you came in because of the clickbait and then you got there and, it wasn't expected. Participation and engagements from attendees. Yeah, so bringing in that human-centered value, the human connection. Hey, Tamar, how you doing? Good to see you. I like interactive elements like this with asking participants to respond. Yeah, so, like someone else said, the right amount, right? Not too much, not too little. Articulation. Yeah. I'm going to guess what you mean by that. I think what you mean is that good use of vocabulary, clear speech, conciseness of words. I don't know that I'm the best with that, but hopefully I can be articulate enough that it's not too painful. Maybe not overuse of jargon, right? If you're speaking to a transdisciplinary audience. Okay, great. Presenter energy. Yeah, so presenter energy, another way to say that is like presence. So everybody's got their own presence, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be an overly charismatic person or extroverted. You can bring your personality, whatever that is, to the table. But the thing is, I think with presenter energy is feeling comfortable, right? That you're enjoying yourself, that you're not nervous, and then your audience can feel like they're comfortable as well. So presenter presence, teacher presence. So what contexts are we speaking about here when we say a webinar? It can really be just any online seminar or presentation. So there's many different kinds. In academia, we'll usually see it in the form of a conference, an employee training, a workshop, a panel discussion, a community discussion. It might even be you have a research presentation to give for a class, or maybe you're teaching a class session. I mean, to me, the advice we're going to give today in this webinar is going to apply for all these situations, right? Any situation where you're having to speak on Zoom. There's some nuance in between, but try to think of things that would apply across the board. All right, so when we're doing online presentations, webinars, the goal really is to facilitate human-centered engagement and provide real value, in my humble opinion, of course, right? So, so the thing is that more important than ever, if somebody's going to come to a webinar, it has to be centered in things that human beings actually care about. And it has to be something that we can't get from a blog, something that we can't get from watching a YouTube video, because otherwise it's kind of a waste of time. Like, why even come if I'm just going to hear, 5 things you can do for this or that, right? It can be that, but there's some extra value you have to bring into it, which we'll talk about. And so as a webinar host, you really want to facilitate this engagement, right? So the process should be smooth for everybody involved. Yeah, so seeing to it that everything happens organically, that nothing feels forced, right? So, you don't want to force anybody to feel engaged because you're like, you have to do these activities, or, okay, now I'm going to talk, now I'm going to read chat, now I'm going to talk and read chat, right? You want everything to be happening in real time so that it feels like more like it would feel in an in-person interaction. So that's because that is where it's like centered in human relationships, right? Everything is smooth and it flows. And the value is more than you can get from doing something else. So why is this important, right? Virtual experiences are, let's be honest, subpar to in-person experiences, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do in an online setting that will completely replicate what you would have in person. So what I mean by that is, think about the environment. Think about what happens when people come into a room together. They're meeting each other. There's side conversations. There's network happening. There's some excitement that comes from meeting new people. These are elements that take place, even the informal conversations, like people coming up and talking to you, getting to know you, asking questions before and after the session. Like, these things tend to happen in person. Also, the participants just getting advice from each other. So in an online environment, we really try to facilitate some of those community conversations. But in an in-person interaction, those things happen organically, right? People are like, oh, have you been doing a webinar? Yeah, I've been doing a webinar. What advice do you have? That happens without you, the facilitator, needing to facilitate that. That said, online environments provide a level of convenience that's unmatched by anything that can be done in person. And it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to increasingly become a norm. And it's a literacy that we all need to have as professionals. And one way you can think about this is comparing it to texting versus voice conversation, right? I mean, texting is not as an effective form of communication as getting on the phone and having a conversation with somebody is, right? It's subpar. However, it's got this level of convenience. You can text many people at once that are from different audiences. You can only talk to one person and have a quality conversation at a time. And it's just the world we live in, right? That's the way things are. And both are important. You need to be able to have a good voice conversation, and you need to have good, text etiquette, right? Good text game, or whatever you want to call it. You have to be able to communicate well in text and verbally. So as a professional, the same sort of goes, right? You have to be able to deliver an in-person presentation, engaging, and you have to be able to do the same thing online. Now, the great comparison, Jonathan, I'd like to add that many people prefer texting to phone calls these days and many prefer virtual remote for a number of reasons. Yeah, Tamara, that's a really good point. A lot of people do prefer texting these days. I know, my niece, for instance, was using an iPad before she could speak. So, we're all cyborgs today in that way, right? It's just become a second brain for us, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Cyborging nation, yeah. So the thing that I want to stress here is that a lot of professionals are still approaching online engagement the same way they would an in-person talk, right? And it's not the same thing, right? It's more like a live stream really than an in-person talk. But and because of that, this is a real opportunity for you, because this is the emerging future. We're in the middle of a paradigm shift, and your ability to redefine the possibilities of what can be done with technology, but root it in things that human beings actually care about and bring in that human value that you couldn't get somewhere else, then you're really setting yourself up to be on the cutting edge of the demand, right? You're going to be in professional demand. If you can get good at doing online webinars, then you're ahead of the game, right? You're going to have an advantage in the intellectual marketplace. All right, so that's the end of my pitch there. Hopefully you're excited. I don't know. All right. So look, here's just to get to the point, right? You came here for a reason. We don't have a lot of time, so let's just get into some practical advice that you can apply. So one thing that I would suggest is turning off waiting rooms, right? None of you had the waiting rooms. You just came in, you were there was some music playing, there was a reflection to write, something to do while you were waiting. So I would suggest turning off waiting rooms, right? It doesn't feel welcoming. Everyone's just sitting around waiting to join. It's more hassle for you. You have to admit people, your co-host has to admit people. Much better, I think, set up an environment, a space, create a virtual lounge for people to come into. And different folks have different ways of doing this. I know Shamini will just like talk to people and have conversations with people as they come in. I like to do this thing where I just have some music playing and I'll have a reflection to write. If it's like a training or it's like a digital tools kind of session, something else that I'll do sometimes is put a QR code on that front slide where someone can scan it with their phone, and then I'll put a link in chat also. And then they can download the software that they're supposed to be using, or they can go to that website where they're supposed to be working on something. So this is also a thing of managing the silence, right? So in an online platform like this, there's going to be silence, right? You're not going to be reading people's facial expressions and getting the sense of the room in the same way. You're not going to be hearing the side talk. There's going to be you and then a lot of silence, right? But you can use that silence well. If people are coming in and they're waiting, give them the QR code. Let them start downloading stuff. Maybe even you put a little packet together of all the activities for the day and all the links, and you made it available on Canvas or online somewhere. You can create a QR code out of any link, or just put the link in the chat and let them access those resources. Let them start using those resources. You can use the downtime efficiently to get people started on whatever you want them to be doing. And if you don't have something practical like software to download or a packet to review or readings for the day that you want them to look over, you can do what I do and just have them write a reflection and then weave that back in, right? Don't just have it be throwaway work. throwaway stuff is never good. That's what we call busy work. Anything you have anybody to do, make sure that you always bring it back so that it's practically meaningful. So if you want to make a QR code and use it for your sessions, here's an example of like a QR code I would put on the slide. And this is the website I use to make it. So it's by bit.ly, and I'll put the link in the chat right now. Yeah, here we go. It's called appqrcodegenerator.com. So there you go. Look at that. I got a present for you. All right. So I put the link in the chat, and what this website will do is any link you have to anywhere, it will just turn it into a QR code. You can download it, put it in your slides, right? And sometimes this is easier because, you know, doing Zoom or any sort of online meeting, as the host, there are a lot of things you have to juggle. Many different screens, many links, and then if somebody can't get a link to something, it can really clog the wheels up and kind of slow down the smoothness of everything. So just putting a QR code on the slide gives them the ability to just quickly pull out their phone camera and get to wherever they have to get without having to ask you too much. All right. So some other practical tips, right? Get to the point, please. Please, for goodness sakes, get to the point. I cannot tell you, I don't want to beat anyone up, but I've been to conferences, online conferences that are just, you know, we're here to get some information. We're here to hear the findings of your research or whatever it might be. And we have these really long introductions. Everyone's spending all this time talking about themselves, giving us their personal biographies, talking about their mission statements. Like, you know, think about this from an empathetic point of view. This isn't about you. This isn't about your department. This is about your audience and what your audience came for, right? And that information, of course, is important to provide, but you don't want to use all the time up top, right? Unless it's a guest speaker and you're presenting that speaker and their background, if they're like a keynote speaker, yeah, makes sense to do some introduction. If it's a panel discussion, yeah, makes sense for everyone to go around and introduce themselves. But if that's not the kind of webinar it is, then don't spend a lot of time with long introductions, right? Just get to the point of the things that people came there for, and then you can weave that information out later. It doesn't really make your department look good for you to bore everybody to death with your mission statements and stuff. But if you provide an engaging webinar, and then you provide that information later on in the webinar, then people actually care and you make your department look good, right? So be empathetic to your participants and then just get to the key takeaways, get to the points that they care about, right? Because your participants came for a reason, right? I mean, like you know, you're all on your lunch break probably, and you came here to, you know, learn how to do a good webinar, right? So do you want to hear me talk about myself, or do you want me to tell you how to do a good webinar, right? All right, not to beat that up too much. Use another device, use another screen. So what do I mean by this? Okay, so right now I'm on my laptop computer, right? And I have this camera. Now, as I'm sure all of you have discovered, when you are presenting a PowerPoint slide on your computer, you can see the slide, but if you had to do something else, you would either have to stop presenting, or maybe you would have another chat window open or your participant window open, but then your slides fill up with a bunch of floating windows and it just clutters your working environment, right? So I would suggest having another device where you're logged into the Zoom, right? So before I start any webinar, I text myself the link to the Zoom webinar and I join from another device. So you'll see there's another Jonathan Aragon. Oops. And that's my cell phone, right? So you can have an iPad if you got one, but another computer, fine. But most everybody has a smartphone, right? So the simplest thing is just to use your smartphone and then have it propped up somewhere where you can see it. And so like right now, it's probably blurred out. Right now I have the chat window open on my smartphone, right? So this helps with the flow of the webinar. It helps me to see everything you're saying in real time. I can easily glance over it and respond to what you say. I can pick up and say, hey, right? And I can text you just like I would text anybody else. So it's already a literacy you have, texting, and there's no reason why you can't use chat the same way in a webinar. It helps the get this. It helps the flow feel more organic, right? So much more engaging to respond to all the things people are saying as they're coming in than to lecture and then check chat and lecture and check chat, right? Similarly, yeah. So you can respond to everything, and because if you're responding to people that participate verbally and then having to take extra separate time to respond to the people that are participating in the chat, it creates separation between the audiences. It treats them almost like they're two different kinds of audiences. And really, it's the same audience. So you want everybody to be in on the conversation together. Now, as far as with the links go, also, you can have a packet on Canvas or something set up that you give everyone access to, SharePoint, whatever it may be. Personally, what I do is I just text myself the links all before the webinar, and I have them ready in my text or on Notepad. And then when I got to send links to my participants, I just copy it and paste it over because I'm logged into Zoom with my phone. So that's a real easy way to do link sharing and make sure everyone can get what they want quickly and easily. It keeps the process smooth. The other thing about having another device is if you're sharing your screen, sometimes there's tech issues, right? So can everybody see your slides? If you go to a website, can everyone see the website? If there's a pop-up window, can they see that? I've done a lot of these webinars, and I will tell you that when it comes to screen sharing, a lot of the times, participants will have to stop you. They're like, we don't see that, we're not doing that, right? It changes the feelings of things, it slows things down. And you don't want to have to ask everyone, can you see my screen? It's like the Verizon guy, like, can you hear me now? Instead of having to ask everyone and get their thumbs up or whatever, you can just view on your other device, right? So if I look on my device right now, I can see what you see. I can see that you see my slides. If I was sharing the screen, I could see that. If I wanted to just scroll over, I can see all the participants, right? So I can see who's joined. I can see if somebody needs help with something. And then I can swipe right back over and get into chat, right? So I can have my presentation here, and then anything else I need to see as far as the meeting goes, I can see directly from my other device. Okay. Feel free to jump in and say if this is helpful, not helpful, if you have anything, or, if I'm boring you. It's okay. All right. So, okay, very helpful. Good. Well, tomorrow. Yeah. Font size is too small. Oh. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I don't actually know how to make it bigger because Command Plus isn't, but you'll have the slides after, so hopefully you can look at it and adjust it. Okay, yeah. So use of a co-host. Personally, I don't think that monitoring chat is a very good use of a co-host, right? Because like I said, if you use another device, you can see chat as it's coming in anyway. But a better use of a co-host is to have somebody else there to volley the conversation with, right? So if you have somebody else that's, organically jumping in, participating in the conversation, and yes, being in chat, but as they want to, as they need to, as it facilitates the conversation, it's a much better use of a co-host. So you could have your co-host be another expert in the same field as you, and that's engaging, even in something more passive, because we all like to feel like we're in on part of that interaction, part of that conversation. We see this in talk shows, we see this in podcasts where you have two hosts and they're both interacting, jumping in, being a part of the conversation, right? So that is far more engaging than just making your co-host like a tech facilitator or something. So if they're another expert in the field, they can provide value based on their experience and their knowledge, right? Their insider knowledge, but they don't have to be an expert. Think about your audience and empathize with them. If you're doing a webinar on how to meet graduate student needs, yes, it also applies to online teaching and TAs. The TA I have in my class, like, they're not doing mundane tasks. They're not grading things. They're not facilitating chats and stuff. Like, they jump in and provide value in the class, right? So I feel like that's a better use of TAs as well. Okay. Now, in a 300-person class or something, yeah, that's different. In a 300-person webinar, that's different. Like, you're going to need someone on there. Or if you're doing a hybrid sort of course where it's in person and online at the same time, I think you do need that second person to be your tech help. But in a situation like this, where the audience is a bit smaller, I think, like up to 30 people, you could easily do it yourself, all the tech stuff. Okay, so Cohost. Okay, so let's say you're doing a webinar on graduate student needs. You don't have to have another expert in that field of research or from your department for that. Why not make your co-host another graduate student, right? They can jump in and provide value from the graduate student perspective. And even if they disagree with you, that's great, right? They don't have to agree with everything you say. Some disagreement keeps things spicy and it brings in a different value. So it's not just the sound of one hand clapping the whole time. So when you're selecting your co-hosts, empathize with your audience, right? Think about what's going to bring value to the conversation as opposed to just that they have to be an expert in something. Not always the case. Remember, we're trying to provide something that you can't get from reading a blog somewhere, right? And one of the best ways of doing that is bringing in perspectives and experience that are unique or some sort of insider knowledge. Or just holding a space for a community conversation to happen. Like, who cares what the top 10 things that make universities successful are? We want to hear from our university participants what things are needed here, right? And the only way that can happen is holding a space for a community conversation with your community. But I digress. Yeah, participation. So please, none of this, like, everybody, cameras off, everybody, you have to, participate in this or that discussion. Like, that's trying to force people to be engaged, basically. And here's what I say about engagement. You can't force anyone to be engaged in your session any more than you can force someone to be in love with you. It doesn't work like that. Engagement is something you feel. And if they're either feeling it or they're not feeling it. And it's not your participants' responsibility to be engaged. It's your responsibility as a host to engage your participants, right? And, so the only thing you can really do is just let it be organic, let people participate as they feel moved to, as it brings value to them. And we talked about silence, but let's keep in mind also that silence is still engagement. If you're watching a movie you're really enjoying, what are you supposed to do in a theater? You're supposed to be quiet, right? But as long as your neurons are firing, if you're engaging in metacognition, if you're participating in double loop thinking, you're being engaged, you're being mentally stimulated, even if you're being silent. So know that some people, even though they're silent, that doesn't mean that they're not engaged. Also, let's understand that not everybody's coming because they're intrinsically motivated to be there. Sometimes they're going to that conference because their advisor told them they have to. Sometimes they're trying to get a continuing education unit or something, and they're just there for that, but they're not interested, right? So you're not trying to engage everybody. You're just trying to engage the people that are there to be engaged. And if they're interested in the subject, great. But if they're not, don't feel like you have to make everybody engaged. Some people are not going to be engaged no matter what you do, right? Just like when it comes to new technologies, there's always laggards, right? You have a new innovation, there's always going to be people that don't want to use that new piece of technology, and they're not your target audience, right? So don't get discouraged if not everybody engages. Use activities where it makes sense. We're doing some relatively low tech participation activities here, just using chat and stuff, but you can use things like Poll Everywhere. You can use breakout rooms, you can use the whiteboard, you can use Google Slides and have people collaborate on Google Slides together. There are lots of tools available for it. And if you're not an expert in something, you don't have some experience or insider knowledge to bring, that's okay, because you can still be a facilitator of active learning. And if you're being a facilitator of active learning in that case, then that's where you want to have, like, for every, no more than 10 to 15 minutes of talk time without some sort of activity for your participants to do to apply what you just talked about. And that's where I say use a lesson plan. You can create a table or a grid and just be like, this is the mode it will be, lecture or student do. This is how much time I will spend on this. This is what we're going to do during that time. And here's the learning outcome it's addressing, right? What if participants do work on a slide in groups? Is it easier for them to make a copy to work on? Or is it easier for a separate link? I have over 20 groups, each working on a game slide, and I'm not sure the best way to facilitate this. Okay, so I have some examples. I don't think I can show you because all my examples have student work on it. but let me make one real quick. Google Slides. Okay. So everyone's different. Okay, you can see my slides. Okay, so everyone's different, but like what I will do is I'll have like topic, new slide, new slide, new slide. Okay, you have a lot of groups, right? So I'll just change the color. Not relying that alone, of course, for accessibility reasons. And then yellow, right? And then probably example. Okay, so I would yeah, anyone with the link can edit, copy. So I would suggest you got 20 groups, you know, just make a different slide for each group and then share one link with the whole class or the whole audience, because then you can simply just, you know, copy the link to that slide, throw it in chat, put a QR code up on the slide that they can access, and then everyone can access that slide and do their work. And if you were to have like a gallery walk or some sort of presentation after, you know, then you can go through each slide on the one Google slide and have a discussion based on that, or they can each share it. But it simplifies it to have one link, I think. Thank you. And the QR code is a good idea. Gallery walk is a good idea too. Yeah, so when it comes to making activities meaningful, I think there always has to be some feedback, some debriefing, you know, like it needs to be visible. So if it's just done in the group, great. The more audience there is, the more meaningful activities are. So if I give you, we're getting more into teaching now. If I give you homework to take home and you do the homework and then you send it to me and I grade it, lowest level of meaning, because the only audience is student and teacher. If I give you homework to do and then I bring it back in class and we all view it as a class, more meaningful, more audience, right? I care more about it because more people are seeing it. Even more meaningful than that, you do homework, you bring it, then we get together, then we revise things as a group, then we review them as a group, then we have a discussion as a group, right? And then even more meaningful than that, you know, using the internet, creating a blog or something together as a class that's going to be publicly available. Obviously, for privacy reasons, you don't want to do that for everything, but where it makes sense, the bigger the audience, the better. Some people work on papers they're actually going to publish in class, so that's more meaningful because it applies to their career. Yeah. All right. Participation, great. Use of screenshots. So like I did a webinar on using Zotero, right? And what I found worked best is actually, before doing the demo of it, is to put screenshots in the slides of each thing. I've done this with like doing HTML coding for Canvas or something like that too. Because when you're doing a live demo of something, there's just so many screen sharing issues where people might not see something or there might be a technical problem. that can jam things up, right? So I would suggest just taking a screenshot of every step you want them to see, and then giving some time to practice or do the demo after. But at least if there's some tech thing, you're not relying too much on tech. Like, technology is great, but but too much reliance on it isn't great either. Sometimes low tech is the best way. And if you're just trying to give them a visual, a picture is great. Stand up. So I'm standing up, right? It depends on who you are as a presenter and what brings you that energy, right? Like we heard about, it's more engaging. It's more engaging when the presenter has energy. So if you're someone that's more comfortable, just you're the kind that sits down and does like sort of an armchair lecture, sit down and do your armchair lecture. If you're the kind of person that you feel like you're in presentation mode when you're standing up, then stand up and deliver your presentation. And you don't need a standing desk or anything like that to do it. What I do is I just set a chair on top of my table, and then I put my laptop on top of the chair. And there you go. You got a standing desk, right? Yeah, and I just got like my other device up on another chair over here. So if that's what helps, if you talk with your hands, you know, you want to stand, right? Do it. Okay, providing value. So I've talked about this a bit. So ways that you can bring value that isn't available on the internet. Focus on your participants, like their own self-discovery. If they're learning more about themselves or they have specific personalized needs in their career, provide that. If you have some sort of expertise knowledge, your own experience or insider knowledge, industry knowledge, that brings value. Personal stories are always good. Community conversations, as I said, make it about that community, bring them in. Yeah. Share the load. If you have to do a webinar or something for work, don't think that you always have to put together this fancy, well thought out presentation, right? Sometimes you can harness the community, bring in a panelist of other experts to talk, give them the spotlight and you facilitate it. Bring in other guest speakers, right? Do I have to do a whole tutorial on how to use open education resources at the Claremont College's library? Or can I just bring in a librarian to do that, right? So harness your community. And above all, you know, experience, right? These things take practice. You know, you're not going to do super engaging webinars right off the bat, right? It's going to take time. It's, you know, you're going to fail, hopefully, and learn from those and make a comeback. You know, and the more you fail and the more you learn from it, the better you do, the more and more confidence you're going to get, and the more value you're going to be able to bring. Okay. Where are we at with time? We're getting close here. I just want to ask you, what have you learned? What advice do you have, right? That's my advice, but I'm sure you've all been teaching classes, doing webinars. What advice do you have that has worked? Feel free to share in chat or out loud. Is there anything you feel like I didn't touch on? Maybe something I said you want to add to. All right, no takers on that. How about, oh, here we go. I just gotta give you time to write. Okay, I often do a demo of how to use online software, okay? And then have them go off and do it and return showing what they did, having the group critique them. Great. So that's adding a lot of value, very practically meaningful, a good use of time and silence. So you're letting them do the work in the session. So much better than just giving them something to do on their own time and then turn it in, right? They get a chance to get feedback using that software. All right, the other thing that I have is to help you with maybe something you're preparing for. If it's a class, if it's a webinar you have coming up, if it's a presentation, whatever it might be, I can give you some advice on how to approach that, or you can give each other advice on it as a community. But we have some business to take care of department-wise. So we need your feedback, right? We need to know how we're doing in these webinars, because if we don't, then we don't know how to provide you with value. So I launched a poll. Please take a brief moment to just answer, what is it, like these 4 questions, right? It's just 4 questions. So if you could provide how satisfied you were with this webinar, what else you might like to see. It'd be much appreciated. Five of 11. While we're doing that, I would just like to say that this session was brought to you by this big idea, human-centered design, designing your webinars by empathizing with your audience, defining their needs, then ideating, prototyping, and doing your next webinar better. We're doing the poll. Jesse shared the link to the Center for Academic and Faculty Excellence in the chat. That goes to the link tree, where you can find our webpage and many other wonderful things you might want help with as a faculty person, as a graduate student, stuff there for both of you. Here are some other webinars we have coming up. We're talking about artificial intelligence, tools like ChatGPT in higher education. That will be Shelby Lamar, and that is Wednesday, February 15th from 12 to 1 p.m. We have negotiating faculty contracts with Gloria Gonzalez, Thursday, February 23rd, 12 to 1 p.m. And then I will be doing one on how to manage imposter syndrome in graduate school on Wednesday, March 8th, same time. And that's an important one, I feel, because it really affects your work cycle, how you approach things, the career decisions you make, how you spend your time, what you say yes to, what you say no to, a lot of really practical things that we don't realize imposter syndrome affects. And I have the psychological and practical approaches to kind of solve that, as well as explain what that is. As far as faculty stuff goes, we also have these Cafe Excellence communities, and we meet at the Hive. Gloria leads that. I'm usually there too. And we have different discussions, right? So we had a whole discussion on ChatGPT and how we're going to approach AI in our classes and in higher education. And then coming up, we have mentoring and being mentored, values, strategic planning, inclusive teaching practices. And we have this course redesign institute in the summer. So if you want basically some some people that we've trained to just lighten your load and come in and help you redesign your courses and get them ready to launch in the fall, show up, bring your stuff. We will make that happen. All right, we got 8 out of 10 poll responded so far. And I wonder if it counts me and Jesse. So that might be the other two. Great. All right. So we're pretty much on time, which is great. Is there any sort of thing you would like some help with, or anything you'd like to say in general? I'll just stop the recording at this point, and you're free to go. You're also free to stay. So you're comfortable to speak. Stop.